mitzvah, gerecht mitzvah. Haver al gerecht haver al quoto mitzvah, gerecht mitzvah, gerecht mitzvah. Ya la 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 la.
Tawonga will shine tonight, Tawonga will shine. Tawonga means I will, or I can. And that was the Indian translation.
Well, I am third generation Tawongan. My grandpa went to Camp Toonga when he was a young little boy, when camp was at Lake Tahoe. And he basically has been coming ever since.
There's something about that camp that it's magnetic, it's a spirit, it just attracts you, it just never leaves you.
I think my first year at Camp Toonga was in 1936, and I enjoyed it very much. They were very important times in my life. Anything to do with Camp Toonga is really my favorite interest.
Every moment, every special moment, every time someone looks around the dining hall at Shabbat and goes, oh, wow, that has been there, and someone has felt that since 1925.
I got a postcard here from camp, and this says, Camp Toonga, Cisco, California, 1927. And I found my oldest brother, Rennie, in this picture. But I went when I was 8 years old, and I was one of the youngest boys up there. And at that time, camp was a 4-week camp for boys, no girls. We didn't allow girls. They had 2-week session after the boys left. We would meet at the ferry building in San Francisco at 6 in the morning, and we would take a ferry over to Oakland. And then we'd get on a train in Oakland, and it would go to Sacramento. We'd get off the train. Then they had these big yellow school buses. And, the kids would get sick on these buses. It was terrible. By the time we got up there, not many wanted to eat dinner that night. And that was the beginning of learning to live together and supporting each other.
Structures up there were very meager. There were tents, covers on wooden platforms, nothing like it is today. On the first day of camp, they would bury Old Man Grouch, and that really impressed me. I've even tried to use that in later life, that it's better to look at the brighter sides than it is to complain.
We played, we minded the counselors. We had about $12 worth of athletic equipment in the whole camp. We used to play baseball out in the cow pasture, and we used, excuse the expression, but we used cow dungs for bases. And it was very touchy if you slid into second base.
I liked the food very much, and they had a juice we called bug juice up there. I liked it, and ever since then, I think it's called Kool-Aid today.
And we had all kinds of contests at camp. We would sign up a ping pong tournament and horseshoes. Everybody played horseshoes, without exception. We had boxing and wrestling and swimming. Wow, we swam in the branch of the Truckee River that was ice cold. It was so cool. Kids didn't worry about it at all.
In the clearing stands a boxer and
There was a boxing ring there. It was a big part of living, learning how to box. I fought in the Golden Gloves in San Francisco. I remember like it was yesterday when the bell rang to go box this kid. I got off the chair, walked up, and he hit me once, and that was the end of the box. That was really the end of my career, but it was still a wonderful experience. One blow and I was out. Being able to get out of camp with a sleeping bag and a tent and good counselors, seeing the beauty and struggling on your own, I think that's very important.
And I always used to love to take my bunk outside and sleep under the stars. And this is one thing that has given me a whole enjoyment of nature my whole life, because it was so beautiful up in the mountains.
We had to carry some of the food in our sleeping bags, so we would roll up the sleeping bags the long way and put canned goods and supplies. You would carry a little handkerchief or neckerchief, and you'd have a lunch in there, and they'd give you dried apricots and dried prunes and cheese. And I was not a good hiker.
Baruch atah Adonai.
At camp, we always had Shabbat services on Saturday morning. I ran into a sermon that I gave when I was about 12 years old at camp. And strangely, it was about how lucky we were to be at camp and enjoying the wonders of the outdoors while Jewish people were being persecuted in Europe by this new flash in the pan, Hitler. When I was in the Army and went overseas, I was a surgical technician, and our outfit had the unusual assignment of going into 6 different concentration camps as they were liberated to set up emergency medical treatment. And I just think that part of my basic foundation for Judaism, in addition to my home, was the continuation of that outside of my home at Camp Toonga.
Having an outdoor service similar to what they have now in an amphitheater, that was very impressive to me at those days. I always wanted to have the experience of a mountain camp, and not as so much as a religious camp, but the directors since my time have enjoyed the religious end of it, have been very successful.
Camp Toonga was a tradition in the making in the 30s, and it went up through about 1942 when we no longer had counselors because they were all going in the Army and Navy and Marines and what have you, and so we had to close the camp in 42.
During World War II, the property became very valuable. The property was sold for $25,000. And then when they had a study committee in San Francisco in the 50s, so we went around and looked at several camps and finally ended up at the present location. Most of the board were pals of mine, and we had a wonderful time opening the camp. I was there for the first opening. The kids came. I had spent a couple of days prior to putting the mattresses and beds together and working, and I think it was a successful first year.
My going to Camp Toonga took place during the Depression years, and I went to the director and asked if I could get a campership, and he turned me down. Well, as a 12-year-old boy, that was about the bottom of the barrel for me.
He said that that was one of the lowest points of his life, and he didn't get to come to camp that summer. And ever since then, he has wanted to help children who aren't as fortunate as some of us to come to camp. So he started a foundation, a scholarship, sending a child to camp every summer. He felt something so powerful that he wants to give back to this camp, and I love him for that.
I've stayed involved because of the wonderful staff they have. In respect of what the counselors and the staff have done over the years, I believe that camp should be someplace where campers, children, and families can appreciate the individual in growth on their own and not in a competitive situation. I believe very strongly in it, and I think I am fortunate I can support it a little bit, and I get a kick out of it.
I think it's important for those kids to know that somebody outside remembers them, an old camper Somehow Camp Toonga has that same sparkle and drawing power for these kids. And once they start going, they go as long as they can. In our family, 5 of our 7 grandchildren have gone to Camp Toonga. I would go, but there's a certain age limit that restricts me from enrolling as a camper.
When children come to camp, what we're essentially doing is giving them memories and tools that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives, whether they recognize it in that moment or 10 years later or 20 years later.
I'll always have one foot in the soil at Camp Toonga.
It'll always be a camp because people remember their good times.
I understand that this film is going to be used to show to prospective mothers and fathers who will send their children to camp. And I can only encourage you to take the risk. There is something about it that they're going to love. They have a magic way of teaching the Tawonga way.